Flags at the White House lowered to half-staff to honor the former Secretary of State and retired General Colin Powell. He passed away Monday morning, aged 84. He served in 3 presidential administrations. The Biden administration is set to restart the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy next month. That's provided Mexico agrees to cooperate. And Amazon is in the hot seat. That's after a bipartisan group of lawmakers say the company may have lied to Congress. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's begin with a moment of remembrance. Flags at the White House lowered to half-staff. That's in honor of former Secretary of State and retired General Colin Powell. Powell's family says he passed away early Monday morning due to complications from COVID-19. That's despite being fully vaccinated. Powell's career as a distinguished soldier started in 1958 and took him from combat duty in Vietnam to the White House. In 1987, he became the first Black national security advisor for President Ronald Reagan. He then served as the youngest and first Black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President George H.W. Bush. That would lead to his highest position as the first Black U.S. Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. His time, however, was mired in controversy due to his advocacy of the Iraq War, which he later called a blot on his record. Colin Powell was 84 years old. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken described him as a beloved, down-to-earth leader who both trusted and empowered the State Department.
Secretary Powell was, simply and completely, a leader, and he knew how to build a strong and united team. He treated people the way he expected them to treat each other, and he made sure that they knew he would always have their back. The result was that his people would walk through walls for him.
Blinken said he was a huge admirer of Powell and highlighted the time they spent together on the 4th of July. Now, staying in the Capitol, a group of lawmakers has a warning for Amazon. They say top executives, including former CEO Jeff Bezos, may have misled or even lied to Congress about the company's business practices. Members of the House Judiciary Committee's Antitrust Subcommittee say they are giving Amazon a final opportunity to provide exculpatory evidence to corroborate the previous testimony and statements on behalf of Amazon to the committee. The bipartisan group that includes Democratic Representatives Pramila Jayapal and Jerry Nadler, as well as Republican Representatives Ken Buck and Matt Gaetz, cited recent media reports that cast doubt on testimony provided by Amazon senior executives. The testimony touched on how the company uses its vast influence to help its own brands. Amazon executives have previously told lawmakers that it doesn't use the data of individual third-party sellers to inform the development of its own private brand products. This comes as ransomware attacks are on the rise, and it's costly. The Treasury Department says in the first 6 months of 2021, victims of ransomware attacks paid hackers $590 million. That's more than in all of 2020. The department said various sectors were targeted, including manufacturing, legal, and insurance. Ransomware makes a victim's computer system unusable unless ransom is paid. Bitcoin is the most common method of payment. Instead of going after a high volume of smaller targets, hackers now use a more sophisticated strategy aimed at bigger targets. The pandemic-driven shift to remote work has made businesses more vulnerable to the attacks. And medical businesses are facing more and more hacks because of their eagerness to pay a ransom to unlock needed healthcare data. Now, let's turn to a different area of security, the southern border. The Biden administration officials said on Thursday they are prepared to restart the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy next month. That's provided that Mexico agrees to cooperate. They say the Department of Homeland Security has been holding talks with Mexico. That's to finalize operational plans to re-implement the policy, preparing immigration courts, and issuing contacts required to build hearing facilities near the border. The program is formally called the Migration Protection Protocols. It hinges on Mexico's cooperation because it forces asylum seekers from some countries to wait in Mexico until their claims are heard by U.S. judges. Officials say DHS anticipates being on a position to re-implement MPP by mid-November, dependent on decisions made by Mexico. In the most recent filing in the case, administration officials blamed Mexico for its delay in rebooting the policy. Mexico said in a statement on Thursday that it has been in communication with the U.S. government over immigration, but they did not specifically mention this program. The Biden administration halted the program earlier this year, but Texas and Missouri sued the administration, alleging the way the program was stopped violated federal law. A U.S. district judge agreed. He ordered the administration in August to restart the policy. The DHS in late September said it's planning to release a memo to scrap the program if a court order lifted the judge's decision. In two filings last Thursday, government lawyers said the government is implementing the injunction in good faith and is entitled to a presumption of good faith in its actions. And now for an update on the Lone Star State. The Justice Department is asking the Supreme Court to block a Texas law that bars most abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy while legal challenges play out. The DOJ made the formal request in an emergency application Monday. According to the department, the law is, quote, clearly unconstitutional. The DOJ says letting it stay in effect would perpetuate the ongoing irreparable injury to thousands of Texas women. The request puts the justices back in the middle of a huge ideological battle. The Texas law is controversial because it bars abortions before most women even know they are pregnant. The High Court will likely issue an order after asking Texas for a response and giving the DOJ an opportunity to reply. A deeply divided Supreme Court allowed the law to go into effect in September as part of a different legal challenge by abortion providers. And now let's turn to another area of controversy, topics taught in classrooms. The Ohio State Board of Education voted to rescind a racial equity resolution it adopted last summer. They originally adopted the resolution in July, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. It highlighted significant gaps in academic performance between Black students and their white peers, acknowledging that, quote, profound disparities between white and non-white students exist in all parts of the Ohio education system. The resolution directed the Ohio Department of Education to require implicit bias training. All employees and contractors had to identify their own implicit bias. The resolution recommended that all Ohio school districts reflect on potential bias in their curricula and policies for hiring, staff development, and student discipline. Following a 4-hour debate on Wednesday night, the Education Board voted to repeal the 2020 resolution by a margin of 10-7. The board put forward a new resolution as a replacement. Board members say they have observed since last July not only a growing national divide, but a troubling focus on the color of one's skin rather than on the content of one's character. The new resolution reads, the board seeks excellence in education for all children and families, without prejudice or respect to race, ethnicity, or creed. It adds that it not only acknowledges the disparities between students of different races, but also those among additional diverse groups, such as economically disadvantaged students. It adds the board affirms its condemnation of racism, hate speech, hate crimes, and violence in the service of hatred. The board condemns any standards, curriculum, or training programs for students, teachers, or staff that seek to divide or to ascribe circumstances or qualities, such as collective guilt, moral deficiency, or racial bias, to a whole race or group of people. Board member John Hagan, who voted in favor of the new resolution, says, I think the initial resolution was very pointed. It kind of said the boogeyman and the problem with these gaps is based on race. I don't think anyone questions whether race might be a factor in this, but there are a lot of factors. The new resolution no longer asks Ohio Department of Education employees or contractors to undergo implicit bias training. It is citing Ohio Attorney General Dave Yosta's legal analysis of the original resolution. In his opinion released last month, Yost said the board does not have authority to require private contractors to take such training. This new one doesn't specifically mention critical race theory, but it condemns any attempt to teach the idea that people of a certain race are inherently racist and should feel guilty for historical injustice and oppression committed by those of that race. And now, before we end, scientists have found evidence of water in the atmosphere of Jupiter's icy moon Europa. NASA says its Hubble Space Telescope observed the presence of persistent water vapor over a large area of Europa's atmosphere. But the water vapor was only present in one hemisphere. It is unknown why that's the case. Researchers used Hubble's ultraviolet imaging to make the discovery. NASA says Europa has a very smooth surface and the solid ice crust looks like cracked eggshell. The interior has a global ocean with more water than found on Earth and could possibly harbor life as we know it. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.